Hello everybody, welcome to another episode of Red Devils Disciples, where today we have a preview for the Man United vs Fulham game, and what a game we have coming up. We've got 6th place Man United fighting, trying to chase down Spurs, trying to chase down Villa, versus 12th place Fulham. Now, last time out we played against Luton. Luton were in 17th and now in 18th, but it showed you what a tough league this is, which means that we cannot take for granted the fact that it is a 12th place team. And then there's some big news regarding squad selection. There's some big news regarding a few other bits and pieces to come up. It's a must-win game to keep that pressure up. We are chasing that Champions League spot, and we cannot take for granted that if we come 5th, we'll get into the Champions League. So we must come in the top 4. That is the minimum expectation we can have of our team this year. Especially when we've got another big reason why it's a must-win game. We've got that City game coming up on the 3rd of March, and that's going to be a big one. And let's be honest, I am not feeling too confident about that game in terms of coming out with a win. But until that point, we need to be perfect, and we need to be winning all our games that we have left. We obviously got Fulham today, and we've got Forest coming up next week that we need to make sure we get 6 points from. We've also got Villa versus Spurs, which is a massive game in our season, even though we're not involved in it. And that's on the 10th of March, so it's after the City game. But that could sort of allow us to gain points on one of those teams that we are chasing, which is why it's really important that we do not drop points until then. We have won 6 from 7 games. Whoa. Talk about the difference from the start of the year to now, where all of a sudden we're starting to win games in a row. We've won 5 in a row in all competitions, which is something that I would not be sitting here saying 3 or 4 months ago, or think that I would be saying 3 or 4 months ago, although I did quietly have that sort of confidence that once players started coming back from injury, we would start to win games again. Looking at the pre-match press conference with Erik ten Hag, boy, it seemed like the reporters were licking their lips, chomping at the bit with a little piece of meat between their teeth, It looked like they were all excited, or initially the ones that asked questions first anyway, were excited to see Manchester United fail, which doesn't surprise me, given that we are one of the most hated teams in the UK, and I think that is because of the amount of success we've had in our past, and the amount of dreams and sort of childhoods we've destroyed over the years. Talk about Arsenal fans, talk about Liverpool fans, talk about Chelsea fans, understandable at the end of the day. But there were some questions that were really sort of targeted, trying to get a negative response from Erik ten Hag. I thought he handled it really well. He was asked about things like Jim Radcliffe coming in and sort of changing the mentality of the club, where the club should have a style of play and managers should adapt to that rather than the club adapting to the manager's style of play. And he absolutely agreed with it. He said that, when he came in, that's what he understood was the situation, and that he has his own style of play and he tries to integrate it with the club style of play and kind of come to a happy medium, essentially. He was asked about working with Dave Brailsford and Dan Ashwood, and sort of the way that it was done was almost like pulling misquotes from his time in Ajax as manager. Things like control with recruitment were thrown at him. That Erik ten Hag needs to have control, or he said that the manager needs to have control. And Erik ten Hag said, yeah, we do need to have control. And it sort of said, we work together as a team, we control it as a team. So he almost deflected that straight back off, and that didn't go down so well because the questions just kept ramping up. He was asked about Rasmus being out, and this almost seemed like a leading question to something that was coming down the line, which was very smartly done by the reporter, but he did not get what he wanted. He asked about Rasmus being out, Anthony coming in, and the reporter referred to Anthony as a big money failure. Objectively analysing it, he had an okay season last year. It was a lot of money we paid for him, and yes, I would say that he is not off to the best start in his Man United career at the moment, and we do need him to step up. And even Erik ten Hag said this is the time for him to prove himself. He needs to step up. We need to see more. But he did say that it wasn't just Anthony. There was opportunities for others like Diallo, like Fosun, or McTominay, and he said it's not 100% that Rashford's going to move to the striker position. Is that a hint to what he's going to do with his lineup? I don't know. We'll just have to wait and see. And there was talk about injuries and how it's been a problem, and it's been a big problem that it should be. And is this a problem specific to Man United? And to be fair to ten Hag, he said, no, it's not a specific problem to Man United. We've just been hit hard by it, which has affected our season. But this is a problem that other big clubs have too. The condensed sort of program, the standards of training, the intensity, all of that. And he did say that it's not just just for us. This happens across the board. And then this is where it was led to sort of, you have Martial and Rasmus as a striker, and essentially they were asking why you only signed one striker in the summer. And they were very direct with this, and to the point where it was borderline rude and cutting the manager off in his responses, because they weren't getting what they wanted from him. So when asked about Martial and Rasmus, he said, look, Martial got injured, and when he got injured, I did want a striker, but there was nothing left in the transfer budget in January to be able to get another player, so he didn't allow it. And he was then immediately asked, "Is this going to derail your season? Surely you won't achieve your targets because you don't have a striker in your midst," kind of thing. And he said, "Well, look, we've got Garnacho, Rashford, McTominay that can all score goals." And then he was cut off mid-response, and the reporter sort of challenged him in terms of, are they actually scoring goals though? Is that enough for Manchester United? And while the reporter does have a point to make, if you look at the last few games, we're talking about the last 5 or 6 games, we've been scoring goals a lot more than we were at the start of the season when we were having a bit of a drought. And because of that, it almost became like a battle with this one reporter who just kept interrupting and talking over him, or a couple of reporters, shall we say. There's one or two, and then he was asked why he gambled for that one strike instead of the two, and Ten Hag said, "Look, this isn't Football Manager. Okay, it's not unlimited amounts of money. We don't have the players of the caliber that we want up front for Manchester United just readily available in the market." And he said, "Martial is on a big contract here. It's not like we can just get another striker and put them on another big contract, And he said, what? So, objectively speaking, you'd have Martial on a big contract. Rasmus has been brought in on a big contract and for big money. You'd have Rashford himself, who can play striker, who can also go there. So that's 3 strikers already. He did 3 options. And he said, and the other thing is, what, am I going to bring in a 4th striker for what? To sit on the bench and not play all season? Of course, the way that the season's gone, during the January transfer window, I did try to get a striker, and I approached the conversation about it, should we say, because it didn't actually make any bids or anything, because there was just no money or wiggle room within FFP, within our budgets. But he did say, it's one of those where you kind of get a full, and this guy again interrupted and started challenging him immediately before he even finished his response. And Ten Hag at this point showed a bit of, as you say in Spanish, cojones, a little bit of pushback. And he just said, look, it's really naive the way that you're thinking. Strikers aren't cheap, especially the ones at Man United levels, And he said, you could even hear at this point some of the other reporters sort of giggling on the side, and to the point where, when he moved on to sort of get a question asked by another reporter, he just smiled, and you could hear the giggling, and you could hear the awkwardness in the other reporter's voice, like saying, "What's this other guy on about? Why is he being this way?" And Ten Hag just simply said, "I know," and just gave him a wink, almost to say, "I know what his deal is. I know what he's trying to do. He's trying to cause, he's trying to cause trouble in the media. He's trying to make sure that everyone turns their back on us." It's sort of that typical thing as a Man United fan that we have, where it's just bombardment towards the manager. We make news, we sell papers, we make money for people. So if things aren't going for well, it's all good for these reporters, but I'm not having that here in my press conference, is essentially what happened there. And then he was asked about, how he feels about Sir Jim coming in. He was really positive about it. He said, look, we share the same ambitions. It's not he was asked about increased pressure. He said, no, it's not increased pressure. It's exactly what we want to do. We want to be at the top. And we need to prove it every time we step out onto that field and every day in training. So it was really positive from Ten Hag, and was having none of this sort of negativity from some of the press the press at the conference. And to the point where they tried to even pull him back to talk about the lack of support that he had in terms of management structure. And Ten Hag simply battered that back and said, look, I'm not looking at the past, I'm looking at the future. It's exciting times, we're looking forward to everything that's coming up, and that's exactly what I want to do. I don't want to focus on the past, I want to focus on the future. Which brings me down to the game today. So obviously we've got Fulham today. In terms of goals scored in the Premier League, they're very similar to us. We scored 35, they scored 34. However, they have conceded a few more than us. So it's only 34 to 41. So it's not a vast difference, but it shows that there is a difference. And it's crazy to think that is the difference between being 6th and being 12th, which kind of shows you how well we managed the goals and goals conceded in the games that we have, Formation-wise, they play a 4-2-3-1, okay? but essentially it's a 4-3-3, so similar to what we do. And going forward, they're quite an organised team, sort of working triangles as they play forward, and they rotate positions within those triangles. So even the striker gets involved. So almost like a Man City, but except where Højlund stays as a focal point, the striker gets involved and sort of rotates into the passing lanes and things like that. And it's worth noting, though, however, that at times when they've started the plays off from the back, they have been caught a few times recently with this passing sort of attitude that they want to have, passing out from the back. And that's where I almost think that this was a game sort of built for Rasmus Højlund, just because of his pressing intensity, just because he likes to press defenders, just because he likes to lead the line from the front, Defensively, they sort of defend as a unit, and they sort of become a hard to break down compact block, which is not man-to-man, it's almost zonal marking, obviously tracking runners and things like that, but because it's zonal marking, they do sometimes get caught on the opposite flanks with people coming in on the counter. In terms of their form, I mean, the last 5 for Fulham, they've won 1, they've drawn 2, and they've lost 2. And the last 5 away games, which is quite a not positive thing for Fulham fans, but for us as Man United fans, it's quite a positive thing. 0 wins, 1 draw, 4 losses. Now, if you flip that to our current form, we have 5 wins, 0 draws, 0 losses, which is a great record to have. And then our home record at the moment with the last 5 Premier League games, even though some of those do stem back to 2023, is 3 wins, 1 draw, 1 loss. But it's really positive in the sense of we are undefeated in 2024, so I fully expect us to go out there and get a good result today. Last 10 meetings between us and Fulham, it is 8 wins for us and 2 draws. We have no losses against Fulham in the last 10, which is obviously very positive. And then obviously moving on to some squad news, which, we got some bad news that Rasmus is out for 2 to 3 weeks. Said nothing serious, but when we're training in high intensities, these injuries do happen, and we all know that. Anyone that's played in sports in the past, injuries do tend to happen. And a 2 to 3 week injury suggests either a twist in an ankle or something like that, or something with a muscle where he's got a minor thing, and he did go on to mention that there is no returner, so Shaw is still out, which is a little bit disappointing, but at the same time, I'd rather not rush him back and have him out for a long period of time. So I would take my time with him. Maybe eye up that Man City game. If we do get a chance to bring him back by then, that would be good. But no returns otherwise. So that means that Malacia, Mount, Martinez, all these guys are still out, and there's no scheduled return day at the moment for them. So in terms of the team that I would pick today, I would go with Onana. He's been on a bit of a decent run at the moment, so I would definitely be keeping him in goal and not trying to move him out of goal. I think stability at the moment is key. Is he lighting the world on fire in goal and making these great saves? No, but he doesn't need to, because those chances are... I'll say we've been very fortunate, even though other teams are taking shots at us, that we've not needed to call on him too much. I think credit for that needs to be given to our defensive line and our midfielders, who are blocking shots that are coming in, which is great to see. Defensively in front of them, obviously Luke Shaw is still out, so I would stick to Lindelof on the left. Maguire would come back in. I know he was subbed off at half-time against Luton, but I think that was more of a precaution because of the yellow card, rather than he was performing that poorly. He wasn't having a great game, don't get me wrong, but he wasn't having a bad game either. So Maguire would stay on for me, and would sort of start with Varane again, because that partnership is growing. Varane had a great game last game, which was good to see. And then obviously on the right, I would go with Diego Dalot. In front of them, again, Casemiro and Mainu. And again, what I'd want to see from these guys is, I want to see a dominant game today where we control possession. So I want to see these guys spreading the ball, sort of keeping control of the ball, making smart passes rather than these long ball forwards. Spread the ball from side to side, forwards, that kind of stuff. And I want to highlight Casemiro at this point and just kind of say what I would like to see from Casemiro is no silly challenges. There's no need for them. You get yourself into trouble, and I know you're someone that plays on the edge all the time, but you getting a yellow card in the first 10 minutes doesn't help us, because then the rest of the game you're on eggshells. So try not to give away silly fouls. Try to anticipate the game a little bit more. He's looked a bit leggy lately, so I kind of want to see if that's going to improve over the next couple of games. If not, I would be considering potentially making a little rotation in there. Who I'd put in, I'm not 100% sure yet, but at the moment, this is our best option that we have. In front of them, we got Bruno, and today we need Bruno to have a good game. I think Bruno is going to be vital with no Rasmus in there. I think we need a goal from him or more constructive play from him where he sets up other players. He's sort of going through a patch of, I would say, not great form, and I think that it's been hidden by the fact that Garnacho and Rasmus are playing really well. Same with Rashi. I don't think Rashi's sort of coming up at the moment, but I think Bruno's been quite quiet lately, and we need him to step it up again today. On the wings, I would not change our wingers. I would go with Rashford on the left, and I would go with Garnacho on the right. I think moving Rashford to the striker is an option, which I'll reveal my striker position now. I've gone with McTominay as a false nine. I think that's been the option that Ten Hag has been leaning towards late in games by putting McTominay up front, and and there's some games where he does move Rashford there, and I get that, but I think Rashford plays better off the left. I think he's sort of starting to come into form, and when I say that, he's just starting to play better in general. Having said that, I saw a clip of him chasing Ross Barkley a couple of weeks ago, and it just seemed like, not a couple of weeks ago, last week, and it just seemed like he just walked and let himself run past. But I would go with Rashford on the left, Garnacho on the right, and then McTominay at striking position. What I could see Ten Hag doing is a couple things. So one option is I could see him flipping Garnacho to the left, putting Rashford up front, bringing McTominay in, and then Bruno on the right, which I think is the most likely option. And hear me out. The reason I haven't put Anthony in is because lately he's not been relying on Anthony as much, although this might be the game where he brings him back into the fold, who knows. But I could see him doing this because he is a big fan of McTominay, and I think that pushing Bruno to the right would sort of give us a different dimension in terms of that, and then you throw Garnacho to the left, which is his preferred position, and then put Rashford, who is a winger but can play in the striker position up front. The other option is that we bring Anthony in and we just drop McTominay and keep Bruno in the middle. And just have Anthony on the right wing, But like I said, I haven't seen Anthony playing much recently. So personally, I think this is more likely than him bringing Anthony in. But who knows what the manager's thinking. In terms of what I expect to see today, I can see this being a frustrating game for us. I can. I can see it being one of those games where I do feel it was tailor-made for Rasmus, which, is why I would go with McTominay, because in terms of physical attributes, it's similar. The difference is intensity, right? Rasmus is a lot more intense in defensive work than McTominay is, but I could see that sort of working. They're going to sit back, and they're going to let us come to them, and they're going to try and hit us on the break. We do struggle with this sometimes, so I think we need to be smart, and we need to make sure that we're focusing on those things. And it brings me to my 3 focus points, which is, I want to see us start the game like we did the last game. Those first 10-15 minutes, I just want to see us being quite intense and sort of pushing on to other teams and trying to pushing on to Fulham and trying to sort of take the game to them, try and get an early goal or two like we did previously. Although, if you look back at the previous game, that was Rasmus Højlund that kind of did that against Luton, and he was a big focal point there in those first 10 minutes. Whether we'd see that from a replacement striker, I don't know. I do think intensity will drop, which, is what my concern is. Whether you play Rashford up front, whether you play McTominay up front, I think that intensity drops. It's not the same as having Rasmus Højlund up front. Secondly, I want to see more midfield stability, so this is my second point. We look a little bit like Diaz in a headlight, you know what I mean? Casemiro just needs to stay calm, and Mainu just needs to maybe support him a little bit more, because Mainu's playing well. I think the weaker link of the two is the more experienced of the two. I'm talking about the guy who won 4 Champions Leagues with Real Madrid. That was considered one of the best centre midfielders in the world, or centre defensive midfielders in the world. But he just seems like he's half a second just behind the run of play. And I'd want to see him today. I want to see him make that little bit step up, and sort of control that centre mid with Mainu. Which brings me to my third point, is keep control. Look, we're in Old Trafford. We should be seeing our possession numbers much higher than Fulham. I don't want to make this an end-to-end game like we have done in the last few games. I want us to start taking more control of the game. Especially Fulham are going to play a low block, which I suspect they will, and try to hit us on the counter. So take control of the game, take possession. Just make sure you don't get caught on the break. Make sure you're doing the right things. Do simple stuff. No worldy passes. None of that stuff. Which brings me to my predicted score. Excuse me. I sneeze in threes, by the way. There'll be one more somewhere. That brings us to my predicted score, which I think is going to be 3-1 to Manchester United today. Even with without Rasmus Højlund, should I say, we should still have enough to beat Fulham at home. Can we take it for granted? Absolutely not. But last week we played 17th place Luton, and we just won that game 2-1. We had lots of chances. We should have really scored a lot more goals, but Fulham are in 12th. So do not take this game for granted just because we're at home. Yes, they have a slightly worse run of form than Luton do, but Fulham have been dangerous this year against other teams. So what I want to see is being professional, go out there, get the job done, and make sure we start hitting that back of the net. So, yeah, that's my pre-match preview. If you liked it, please make sure you like, share, subscribe. And I'll see you in the post-match. I can feel the other sneeze coming, so I'm going to end the stream as quickly as possible so I don't have to sneeze on screen again.